A man at the pool told a black woman to pack up her things and leave, assuming she didn't belong there. What he didn't know was that she had lived there for nearly a decade, and she was also a seasoned FBI agent. Maya Green didn't step outside that Saturday to make a statement. She wasn't wearing her badge, she wasn't on the clock. And after 22 years as a special agent with the FBI, she'd long since lost interest in arguments, proving points, or being right in public. What she wanted, what she needed, was silence. After 3 straight weeks of debriefings, travel, and back-to-back meetings at the Bureau's Atlanta field office, this quiet pocket of time felt like a lifeline. Just one peaceful day in her home neighborhood of Windermere Pines in Alpharetta, Georgia, where the sidewalks were smooth, the mail was still hand-delivered, and the worst drama usually involved someone trimming their hedges an inch too low. She threw on her hoodie and navy joggers, slipped into a pair of sandals, tucked her locks into a ball cap, and carried a stainless steel water bottle under one arm. No makeup, no earrings, no phone. She left everything that said agent or authority or Washington, D.C. back on the hallway table. Today she just wanted to be a tired black woman in her 50s enjoying the sun. The pool wasn't far, just a short stroll past her hydrangeas and through the path behind the clubhouse. The late morning air smelled of pine needles and distant barbecue. A few kids were already laughing in the water, their voices rising and falling like waves. When she pushed open the black iron gate, the sound wrapped around her like a familiar blanket. This was her version of peace. The pool sparkled under the Georgia sun. A few families were scattered across the patio, some older couples flipping through paperbacks, a pair of teenage boys tossing a beach ball, and a young mother trying to convince her toddler to sit still long enough for sunscreen. Maya gave a small nod to the lifeguard, a tall Latino kid named Luis, who had greeted her dozens of times over the years. He pulled out one earbud and offered a casual, "Good afternoon, Ms. Green." She smiled, nodded, and chose a lounge chair near the shallow end, close to the honeysuckle that had just started blooming on the back fence. She leaned back with a soft exhale and unscrewed the top of her water bottle. For a few minutes, she let everything go. She wasn't thinking about the mess in the Midwest Division, the internal politics back in D.C., or the junior analyst who kept filing late reports. She wasn't anyone's boss, anyone's target, or anyone's protector. She was just Maya, homeowner, neighbor, woman in need of sunlight and silence. The warmth on her skin, the slow rhythm of water, and the scent of chlorine were all she wanted. And then came the footsteps. She didn't open her eyes at first. They were firm, confident, walking like someone who already knew they were right. When she did look up, a tall white man in a crisp polo shirt and khaki shorts stood a few feet away. He wasn't carrying a towel. He wasn't wet. He wasn't smiling. He looked like someone on patrol. "Excuse me," he said, voice clipped and polite in that way people use when they're preparing to escalate. "Do you live here?" Maya blinked. "Yes, I do." He tilted his head slightly, arms crossed. "Really? That's funny. I've lived here for almost a month and I've never seen you before. I've owned my house on Dogwood Trail since 2013, she replied, keeping her voice steady. The man gave a short laugh, the kind meant to sound friendly but didn't. "Well, we've had some issues lately. People sneaking into the pool who don't belong. I'm sure you understand." Maya studied him, noting the crisp edges of his clothes, the sweatless face, the hint of a freshly printed HOA flyer sticking out of his back pocket. "I use the gate like everyone else," she said, not moving from her chair. "You don't have a key fob on you," he pointed out. "It's in my bag," she answered, making no move to retrieve it. He shifted his stance. "Look, I just think it's odd. I mean, you say you live here, but I've never seen you once. Shouldn't neighbors run into each other?" "Or maybe," Maya said quietly, "you've just been looking in the wrong direction." That one landed. His mouth twisted slightly, but he pressed on. "You can make this easy," he said, "or I can call the HOA board and let them sort it out. I already told you who I am." "I don't need the attitude," he snapped, now raising his voice slightly. "And I don't need to be interrogated at my own pool," Maya replied, her voice unwavering. The air shifted. It was still a sunny day, still a friendly pool, but now there was tension under the surface, thin and unmistakable. A few people nearby started glancing over. The young mom had paused mid-sunscreen application. Luis, up on his lifeguard perch, pulled out both earbuds. "So why not just show me your fob?" the man said. "Because I don't owe you that," Maya said plainly. "You came over here with an assumption, not a question, and I'm not going to validate it by jumping through hoops for you." His jaw clenched. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Maya leaned forward just slightly, locking eyes with him. "Number you are. You walked up here like you were catching someone in the act. You decided I didn't belong before I said a word, and now you're doubling down because you don't want to admit you were wrong." A silence settled around them. People weren't pretending not to listen anymore. The man took another breath, forced a thin smile. "I'm just looking out for the community. I've got a daughter. What if someone shady came in here pretending?" Maya held up a hand. "You saw a black woman sitting alone and decided I was suspicious. That's what this is. You didn't question the older couple. You didn't ask the teenagers for ID. You came straight to me. Why do you think that is?" His face flushed, not red, but visible. "You could have introduced yourself," she continued. "You could have said, 'Hey, I'm new to the neighborhood.' I would have offered you a water from my cooler. Instead, you tried to check me like I was trespassing." The man looked around, sensing for the first time how many people were watching. He straightened his back, but it didn't have the same strength as before. "I'll talk to the HOA board," he muttered. "Let them figure it out." "Good," Maya said. "Tell them Maya Green says hello. Mark Caldwell can vouch for me. He and I served on the security committee together for 3 years. He paused. Something flickered in his eyes again. Maybe the realization that the woman in the chair wasn't just another neighbor. But his ego hadn't caught up to the facts. From across the patio, an older woman raised her voice slightly. "Maya, you want us to call Ken? He's home right now." Maya turned and smiled at her. "No need, Mrs. Porter. Just a small misunderstanding." The man, Grant, she would learn later, took a slow step back. But he didn't apologize. Not yet. Grant didn't walk away immediately. He lingered, shifting his weight from foot to foot, his arms crossed again in a posture that might have looked confident to someone not paying attention. But Maya had spent 2 decades reading body language like a second language. His stance wasn't firm. It was defensive. He hadn't gotten the reaction he was expecting. She wasn't flustered, she wasn't apologizing, and she definitely wasn't packing up and leaving. That bothered him more than anything. He kept trying to reframe the conversation, kept trying to regain some sense of control, but the audience around them had grown and the ground beneath him had started to shift. He couldn't retreat without looking wrong, and he couldn't push forward without sounding aggressive. That was the danger of this kind of interaction. It didn't need shouting to be oppressive. It wore the face of concern, wrapped in politeness, and spoke in the tone of someone who claimed to just be following the rules. Maya knew that game. She'd seen it at airports, in boardrooms, even in federal courtrooms. She knew it by name and rhythm. It always began with a question masked as curiosity, and ended with the burden of proof being shoved into the hands of the person who had done nothing wrong. She sat back again, adjusting her sunglasses, her movements slow and deliberate. Grant took that as another challenge. He pointed again at her bag. "Seriously, what harm is there in just showing the fob? If you live here, then what's the big deal?" Maya didn't even look at him. "Because I'm not going to prove my presence to someone who walked over here already convinced I didn't belong. You don't want confirmation, you want compliance." The words landed heavier than he expected. His mouth opened like he was about to respond, but nothing came out. From the corner of the pool, the teenage girl with the phone was now clearly watching, her screen still dark but her expression alert. Luis was sitting up straighter in his lifeguard stand, earbuds out, scanning the pool more intently than usual. A few people nearby had stopped their conversations entirely, pretending to read or check